Lesson 93, hoti. Notice that our new word for this lesson begins with a rough breathing. It has the letter omicron with two markings over it, right, Catherine? It's got a rough breathing and an acute accent.
Yes, and so this is one of those words where it's really good that the print is bigger for our Greek words so that it's very obvious which markings they are because they're both stacked onto a single letter.
Right. Sometimes you have to get out a microscope just to see some of these markings, depending on the book. And
if it's an old book, sometimes the ink blotted and did something funny too.
Incidentally, the word microscope comes from Greek roots. Mikros means small, and then skopos has to do with watching, right?
Yeah, skopein or skopeo is the verb to mean I look at intently.
So mikroskopos, microscope, to look at something small intently. And that's what a microscope does. It lets you look at tiny things in a very detailed way.
Well, our word here, even though it's not microscopic, it is pretty small. And but it's a very important word, right, Bill?
It is. And the way we're presenting it here in this book is as a word that simply means because. It can be used in other ways. It can be used to report secondhand what someone else said.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll learn about that later. That's a more advanced thing that you can learn about in the future. But for right now, we're just studying one aspect of how this particular word can be used, and that is to mean because. And so you can plug it into a sentence, in a Greek sentence, just as you would plug in the word because into an English sentence. And Catherine, this word is special because it's a conjunction. Basically, when you boil it down, it's really joining two complete thoughts.
Right, and that's actually where it gets its name because in Latin, there's a verb, conjungere, which is where we get the noun conjunctio, which is the root of our word conjunction, and it means to join together. And so a conjunction is a word that joins together different parts of the sentence and shows how they relate to each other.
That's right, Catherine. In Latin, con, C-O-N, means together or with. And then the J-U-N-C-T part, junct, in the word conjunction, that means to join. So literally, conjunction, that word means to join together. And so that's what's happening here with hoti. We have an example sentence here. And in the example sentence, we have polakis trecho, which is a complete thought. And then we have ailu rosemi, and that's another complete thought. So polakis trecho is one complete sentence in and of itself. Ailu rosemi is a complete sentence. And so they're being joined together by hoti.
Mm-hmm.
So in one sense, we just have two equal sentences being joined, although sometimes you'll see it presented as, because I am a cat, you'll see that presented as one sense unit, as a subordinate clause.
Yeah.
So there is that way to look at it too. By the way, they already know one conjunction, right?
Yes. And, kai.
Yeah, the word and, kai. So really this hoti is really their second conjunction.
Right. And they'll see conjunctions explained somewhat differently in different textbooks, and sometimes different, as you said, different conjunctions will get put into different classes, depending on the author of the textbook, and whether the author of the textbook is thinking about English grammar primarily, or Greek grammar primarily, or things like that.
When you're looking at grammar from a foreign language perspective, sometimes we present things differently, especially with indirect objects. I've noticed that.
Mm-hmm.
English grammar people don't like to perceive the word to as working toward an indirect object because they want to say, oh, well, that's a prepositional phrase.
Right, which in English it is, but...
In English it is, but in Greek and Latin, we throw that in just to translate a bare dative.
Right, which you don't have a preposition in Greek or Latin serving that function.
Exactly, yep. So that's a little hiccup there between the way Latin or Greek grammar is presented and the way English grammar is presented.
And hoti kind of falls victim to this as well, because in Greek, it can serve as a coordinating conjunction, but in English, it's a subordinate conjunction, generally.
Oh, which is what I was talking about a moment ago.
Right. So in English, we're not supposed to start sentences with because in English, it's a subordinate conjunction. It needs to have something else to depend on. But in Greek, you can start a sentence with hoti and it's totally fine.
Right. The rules are just different. And like in Latin, you can start a sentence with a relative pronoun that kind of connects it to the previous sentence. So really the rules of the game are just different in these other languages. But one place where you can find subordinate clauses a lot is the North Pole, because Santa Claus, his elves are really subordinate clauses. So let's take a look at our example sentence. Polakis trecho says, I run often, or I often run. And then we have hoti, which means because. And now in the second part of the sentence, we'll have yet another thought that's explaining why I never run. Ailu rosemi, because I am a cat. So the first part makes a statement, and then the second part tells you why that is the case. And we have the word because here joining together those two parts. So let's take a quick look at a couple of exercises. In number 1, it's very similar to the example sentence. We have Polakis trecho, I run often. And then we have hoti, which means because. And then we have another complete thought. Hippos emi, I am a horse. So I run often because I am a horse. And really, since it's a horse talking, I ought to use kind of a horsey sounding voice. I ought to say, I run often, or maybe not.
I run often because I am a horse.
You know why horses can never agree on anything?
Is it because they always say nay?
Yeah, because whenever they take a vote on everything, they all say nay. And so it's all right, enough horsing around. Let's go on to exercise 2.
So number 2, Polakis katheudo, hoti ego ailu rosemi.
Okay, so we have a talking cat, apparently.
Yes. So here, I sleep often, polakis katheudo, is one complete thought. And then ego ailu rosemi is also one complete thought. I am a cat. And then the hoti in the middle is joining those two separate clauses. And so it's being the conjunction here. So I sleep often because I am a cat.